Hello and welcome to the Nexus Today show, the Mexican Standoff, starring President Enrique Pena Nieto and that guy across the border. Well, their showdown is reaching its climax with President Trump sending in the National Guard down to the border. He's also pushing ahead with that wall. Meanwhile, Trump is threatening to hurt Mexico economically by smashing up Nafta. Is he serious? And finally, as we plan our summer holiday, is Mexico a safe destination? Some parts are said to be as dangerous as Iraq and Syria. Well, all of that and more coming up right now in the Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in the Nexus we're looking at how Mexico's president is dealing with his rather noisy neighbor, Senor Trump. Now, we've invited three experts to help us out, starting with Brenda Estefan. She was a security attaché at the Mexican embassy in Washington. Jan Halper-Hayes was an advisor to Donald Trump during the president's transition phase. And we also have Javier Farje. He is a Latin American journalist and has been reporting from the region for many years. So, now we're all together. Let's watch our first report. Two presidents in a Mexican standoff.
Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists.
De esta retórica estridente solo ha llevado realmente a escenarios muy fatídicos dentro de la historia de la humanidad. Así llegaron Mussolini, así llegó Hitler.
Yes, we're going to have the wall, and yes, Mexico is going to pay for the wall 100%.
Would Mexico pay for that wall?
There is no way that Mexico can pay a wall like that.
Breaking news involving the standoff between Mexico, the Mexican president, and the U.S. President Donald Trump.
President Pena Nieto canceling his visit to Washington.
There was a question about whether the Mexican president would come, and then Donald Trump tweeted this morning that he shouldn't come if they're refusing to pay.
Staying in this clash, in this battle, is simply bad for both countries.
Caravan of more than 1,000 Central Americans is traveling across Mexico tonight.
The group traveling through Mexico toward the U.S. border, and the president says it must be stopped.
I told Mexico very strongly, you're going to have to do something about these caravans.
Let's clarify this. These people are not storming the border wall. They are going to actually go through legal processes.
Until we can have a wall and proper security, we're going to be guarding our border with the military.
What's the impact of our having National Guard troops on the border with our relationship with Mexico?
It's not something that we welcome.
No tendremos miedo a negociar, pero nunca vamos a negociar con miedo. Estamos convencidos de que poniéndonos de acuerdo como amigos, socios y buenos vecinos, a ambos países nos va a ir mucho mejor que confrontándonos.
Well, who's winning the standoff? Let's go to Javier. Javier, you had the Mexican president there right at the end, looking straight down the barrel of the camera, sounding really tough. Is he tough?
Not really. I don't think so. I think he's quite weakened because of his administration. It's not very popular in Mexico at the moment, which is a completely different debate. I think the invitation he made to President-elect Trump last year, or the year before, I think, to Mexico did not go down well in Mexico. Many people oppose the wall. At the same time, former President Vicente Fox produced a video, and I cannot repeat everything he said because some of the things cannot be actually broadcast, but he said we're not going to pay for that such and such wall. Yeah. So I don't think at the moment that President Pena Nieto is winning. I don't think anyone is winning this one at the moment because the wall is very unrealistic. President Pena Nieto is on his way out. Don't forget that we have they have presidential elections in July this year, which means that he cannot really negotiate anything which could be but permanent, because the new president may change all that. So I think he's weak because of his presidency, but at the same time, and of course we have the problem of the violence caused by the drug cartels.
So he has a very weak hand right from the beginning, really. So when he confronts Trump, he just doesn't look like he has a very strong hand to play. Anyway, let's go to Jan Halper-Hayes for a moment. Jan, we want to talk about another aspect of this story, which is sending down the National Guard. Initially, Trump said we're going to send in the military. People got very excited. Then it turns out he's going to send in the National Guard. They're heading down there from Arizona, from Texas, not as many as in the past, so it's not exactly unprecedented. Is it really unnecessary to send them down there?
No, I think it's absolutely necessary to do that, but it's also a political move. The fact is that we've got the midterms coming up. Trump promised to build a wall.
Right.
Congress has not given him the money to do so, and it's actually the same play that Obama and Bush both did. In 2002 and 2012, or 2006 and 2012.
Bush sent down far more troops, about 6,000. You said it was necessary before you went on to talk about the politics. Why is it necessary?
You can put a toe across the borderline, one toe, and that means you get to stay in America. You get your little bit of a fine and you're told to report to court, and we don't have enough judges. And we don't have enough border people to deal with it.
Well, actually, I mean, the president was citing very recently this caravan that was supposed to be coming up from Central America, particularly from Honduras. Take a look at all these people here. A lot of them are young men, but there are also young women here and families and so on. Let's take a look at the route that they've made. Very dangerous countries, up through Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, into Mexico. Let's go to Brenda Estefan. Brenda, please just remind our viewers why these people are making that dangerous journey from Central America up into Mexico and then hopefully on to the United States. Why?
So this group migration is intended to catch the attention of the public towards human rights and migrant human rights. It's a yearly event. It has been going on for many years.
Yeah, but why do the people make this dangerous journey? What are they trying to get away from?
They're running away from crime. They're running away oftentimes for a life that's been threatened. And let's think that 70% of these people are either children or women. So only 30% are young men.
Javier, are those the stats that you're familiar with? Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Listen, most of the Central Americans who go through Mexico to the U.S. are from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. 3 countries which have been infiltrated, especially Honduras and Guatemala, by the Mexican drug cartels who are actually operating in those countries, which means that these people are escaping violence from the very drug cartels who get the money from the drug market, that is the U.S. So yes, they are escaping an extreme violence and they have
let me back to Jan. Fair enough, isn't it? People escaping violence, they have a right to go into the United States and seek asylum, right or wrong?
Well, you know, America has been the place that people go to and has been like a parent in taking care of people. But what we have to look at is that we don't need more people living off of our system. And Trump's argument is merit-based immigration. And so we can't take everyone in that wants to escape their country. You know, there should be other countries that are willing to take them in and protect them as well.
And Jan, one of your, particularly from the right, the Conservatives, one of their biggest concerns is, of course, crime. And we've recently had the stats from the federal stats anyway. We've got here, you can see 8.4% of the population are non-US citizens, yet 21% of the federal crimes are committed by these by the non-citizens. Now, if we break those convictions down a little bit, we've got federal crimes committed by non-citizens, kidnappings 43%, 31% of drug convictions. I mean, Brenda, you have to concede, at least at that prima facie level, these are very worrying, and maybe Americans have a right to be concerned about this.
When you look at the big cities in the States, the cities that accumulate a bigger number of migrants are actually the safer cities. And if you look at those cities are where people didn't vote for Donald Trump.
How do you account
I don't
for a
think there's
disproportionate? No, Brenda, I have to ask you, how do you account for a disproportionate amount of crime at a federal level being committed by non-citizens? I mean, are you able to answer that one?
I would say it depends what study you look at, but one thing that I want to be
from
clear
the
about
Government
is
Accountability
that
Office.
migration levels from Latin America or from the U.S. southern border into the U.S. are at their lowest record in the last 40 years. So let's think, an agent of the Border Patrol back in the early 90s would stop over 350 people per year, whereas now they're stopping around in between 14 and 15 per year. So even the Border Patrol studies have suggested that it would be better to relocate their agents in the legal ports of entry to make a more expedite migration, as opposed to just be standing there waiting for 14 people in 365 days a year.
Javier, I'm sorry, we have to move on. I wanted to ask you about the wall. We've got a little picture up of the wall here. So these are some of the more favourite prototypes. A bit of a cylindrical look at the top, something see-through at the bottom, very, very tall. But imagine trying to wall off the whole country. The costs are estimated at around 20 billion. I know you've got huge reservations about this, Javier. Why would you not put 20 billion towards a wall?
You want to cover the 777 miles, we're talking about like around 25 million per mile, which is going to be extremely expensive. Second, you have to recruit more people to guard that wall. We are talking about 5,000 new border patrols. It's going to be extremely expensive, very bureaucratic to collect these people. At the same time, there's already an increase of border patrol between the U.S. and Mexico anyway.
Okay.
This wall is just a political gesture by President Trump.
Wow, it's an expensive political gesture, Javier. Okay, well, I mean, he's got other things up his sleeve, hasn't he? He's got other mechanisms, other ways of using leverage on Mexico. Now, one is Nafta, which we'll get to in a moment. The other is another acronym, DACA. Well, that program allows people who are brought to the United States illegally as children to avoid deportation and get a work permit. Yet, here's Trump's view on that now.
A lot of people are coming in because they want to take advantage of DACA, and we're going to have to really see. They had a great chance. The Democrats blew it. They had a great chance, but we'll have to take a look. But Mexico has got to help us at the border. They flow right through Mexico. They send them into the United States. Can't happen that way anymore. Thank you.
Well, Trump offered the 700,000 people enrolled in DACA and 1 million more illegal immigrants a 10-year path to citizenship in exchange for the $25 billion for the wall, ending chain migration, so the new citizens can only bring in their spouses and children, not their siblings and parents, and ending the immigration lottery. 50,000 people, of course, every year end up in the United States through that proposal there. Well, let me go back to Brenda for a moment. Brenda, the Republicans say that is a generous offer and that they should have taken it and be grateful for that.
25% of the entrepreneurs in the States are migrants. 15% of the labor force are migrants. One in every third new enterprises are founded by migrants.
Brenda, I'm sorry. The question was, the Trump proposal puts all those currently illegal citizens on a path to citizenship as long as there are a few concessions for him, which we've already outlined. Why didn't they just grab it with both hands?
No, there are not a few. As you mentioned, it's ending chain migration, ending the visa lottery.
Right, whoa. So chain migration is where someone becomes a US citizen and then is limited to bringing across their spouse and their children. You want them to have the right also to bring in who? Their grandparents, their siblings?
No, just the way it is. But one thing that you have to keep in mind, and not only for Mexicans, but also like any Americans, it's that before Trump, DACA was not part of the migration discussion.
Look, Jan, I've got to come back to you. Do you think it was a generous offer that they should have grabbed with both hands?
Oh, it was an extremely generous offer. And in fact, DACA was declared illegal. First off, Obama created it through an executive order, and our Supreme Court said it was illegal. The fact that Donald Trump actually had campaigned on not offering a path to citizenship and gave really this olive branch to the Democrats But here's the thing, the Democrats do not want Trump to succeed. They would rather focus on the illegals, keep that going, but not really end this immigration issue.
Javier, you've got to come in, you're shaking your head.
Well, DACA has worked. 55%, as Brenda mentioned, 55% of people who benefit from DACA in the last few years are employed, and 33%, these are official figures, are employed and studying, which means that they are benefiting the American economy. Stopping DACA isn't going to stop illegal immigration. It's going to make it even worse because more and more people are going to be being illegal, between inverted commas, trying to get into the U.S.
Javier, I'll let you have the last word on that one. We've got to move on. Look, that's DACA. Now let's look at Nafta. Well, Trump is threatening to smash up the trade agreement like a Nafta piñata, and he's not the only one. Hola, and welcome to the Nafta Party, the North American Free Trade Agreement hosted by the three amigos, America, Canada, and of course Mexico. Mi casa, su casa. It's held together for years, but is the party now coming to an end?
If you look at the caravan of thousands of people coming across, I told Mexico, look, you have a cash cow in Nafta. Nafta's been great for Mexico, has not been good for the United States.
Yet it was Trump's political hero, Ronald Reagan, who first championed the idea of abolishing tariffs and quotas between the three back in '79. But it was Bill Clinton who sealed the deal in 1993.
NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations. It will create the world's largest trade zone and create 200,000 jobs in this country.
Covering more than 480 million citizens, NAFTA is one of the largest trade agreements in the world. And in the more than 2 decades since its implementation, trade between the three countries has increased fourfold. And as it's become easier to buy each other's goods, Americans, for example, have seen their grocery and oil bills come down. But it's also increased the trade deficit between the US and its neighbors. Mexican production is more affordable due to lower wages and benefits, and this has weakened the bargaining position of US workers in the same industries. American car makers, textile manufacturers, and others have moved a lot of their production down south.
The fact is, NAFTA, whether it's Mexico or Canada, is a disaster for our country. It's a disaster. It's a trading disaster.
And on the other side of the border, critics too. Mexican farmers complained that they couldn't keep up with subsidized American agriculture. Environmentalists worry that mass production in Mexico has increased pollution and damaged the environment. And unions in Mexico complain that NAFTA has failed to lift low wages in Mexico and improve labor conditions, leaving nearly a third of the Mexican workforce working in low-paid manufacturing jobs.
An economic order in the world that will promote more growth, more equality, better preservation of the environment, and a greater possibility of world peace.
Ah, Bill, sounds good, in theory. Well, there we go. Let's go back to Javier. Javier, if Trump breaks up NAFTA, who will hurt more, the United States or Mexico?
Probably Mexico, but many small businesses in the U.S. that export a lot of cheap products to Mexico will lose a lot, especially small and medium businesses in the U.S. who have benefited from NAFTA. At the same time, it's going to affect some labor in Mexico. It is true that some labor has been lost in the U.S., but according to a report made by the Congressional Research Service, there's not a major impact of NAFTA in the economy of the U.S. That means that any reform or any smashing of NAFTA isn't going to make any difference for the American economy.
Jan, you've worked with Donald Trump. You've met him socially as well. Is he serious?
He is absolutely serious, but he uses dramatic language to get the attention. And he likes people to think that he's crazy and he's going to destroy things. But the fact of the matter is, he's neither an isolationist or a protectionist. But that agreement was created 25 years ago. He wants bilateral agreements with countries so that you can negotiate the benefits that both sides are winning.
Okay, Brenda, I need to come back to you. I mean, you've worked inside the Mexican government. Has NAFTA helped or hurt Mexicans over these 25 years or so?
I think there are people who have been beneficiaries of NAFTA, and some others have been hurt. I think that's true for both sides of the border. But one thing that we have to keep in mind is that Mexico is the second biggest export market for the U.S. Mexico buys more from the U.S. than Brazil, Russia, India, and China together, or more than the 5 biggest economies in Europe
So
altogether.
Mexico has some leverage of its own then?
Yeah, and over half of the states in the U.S. have Mexico as the first export market. If you think of yellow corn, Mexico is the single biggest buyer of yellow corn from the state. So they do have something to lose if Nafta goes off.
Okay.
I think that over 5 million jobs in the States depend on trade with Mexico.
All right, thank you, Brenda. Well, NAFTA aside, Mexico can always rely on its beautiful beaches to bring in the tourist dollars, at least $20 billion last year. Or can it? The country's murder rate is soaring. Wouldn't that put you off?
Yes, it looks like paradise, great beaches, great weather, a seductive picture. But on the flip side, Mexico can be a dark and dangerous place. The government's been waging war on the drug gangs since 2006. And since that year, as many as 150,000 people have been killed in drugs-related violence. Last year alone, nearly 30,000 people were murdered, a new record for Mexico, putting its murder rate at around 20 per 100,000, 4 times higher than its neighbor to the north. And the United States is worried, declaring 5 Mexican states no-go areas on the same danger level as Syria and Yemen. 3 of the world's most dangerous cities, not including war zones, are in Mexico. Los Cabos is the most dangerous city in the world, with a homicide rate of 111 per 100,000. Then comes Caracas in Venezuela, but then we're back in Mexico and Acapulco. Imagine, Acapulco in the state of Guerrero, once a great location for movies, is now being called Mexico's murder capital.
You can't say no in Acapulco.
But you may want to think twice about going there nowadays. Anyway, back to the list. Brazil's Natal is number 4. Then back to Mexico for Tijuana at number 5. Extraordinary. Yet here's the strange thing. Tourist numbers are increasing. When the drugs war started in 2006, 25 million people holidayed in Mexico. 10 years later, 35 million. Last year, closer to 40 million, putting Mexico firmly in the top 10 tourist destinations in the world.
Amazing. Let's go back to Javier. Javier, the murder rate is at a record high, but the tourist numbers are also going up and up and up. Can you explain that?
The main victims of the violence in Mexico are the Mexicans, not the tourists. The drug cartels cannot afford to alienate a potential market for the produce. We're talking about supply and demand here. It's awful. We shouldn't be using those terms, but that's how it operates. Which means that and also foreigners and foreign tourists are very well protected in the holiday resorts where they go. Because they don't have to see the nasty war that's going on within Mexico, for which Mexicans are suffering the consequences of this. So yes, so that's why they are still going there, because tourists are not going to suffer.
Yeah. And if one of these sort of lone drug dealer types tries to kidnap a tourist for ransom, presumably the cartels are going to clamp down on him hard.
Oh yes, the rival cartels will come heavy on them and probably kill them in a very nasty way, because you don't mess with the market.
Brenda, come back to you just very quickly. Is it true that a lot of the tourist dollars actually doesn't help the Mexican coffers, because you've got the tour operators creaming it off and not paying taxes, and the poor workers who are being paid a very, very low wage?
Well, no, if you look at the living standards of Mexicans, it's actually the touristy areas where Mexicans have a higher living standards, so that might not be the case. Also, I would say that if you look at numbers of violence around the region, Mexico is still quite low compared to other countries in Central and South America. It's just that it had a steep increase in the last few years, and of course that caught the attention of the international media. But if you ask the 1 million US citizens that live in Mexico, they don't just come for holidays, they live in Mexico, they decide to retire here. You probably could get a better answer on why they like our country and they like being here.
Let's ask Jan. Yeah, sure, let's ask Jan. You spent a lot of time in Mexico, Jan. Fact is, if it was a little safer, surely the income from tourism dollars would be even greater. It's something like 10% of the economy right now.
Well, I'd be interested in knowing how many people make a decision not to go to Mexico, because it actually is very affordable. It's a beautiful country. The Mexican people,
Yeah.
you know, they have the expression, my house is your
Yeah.
house, and are very warm. And I have gone there since our country has been warning not to go, because you just don't go into the areas where you know the cartels are.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Jan. Well, we're nearly out of time, but we can just squeeze in one more attempt by Donald Trump to get Mexico to pay for that wall. Check this out.
Hola, President Nieto.
Guy who's going to pay for the wall says what?
Okay.
No, guy who's going to pay for the wall says what?
Okay.
No, you have to say what?
You said what? You're going to pay for the wall.
No way. You pay, loser. You're a bad hombre. Here come our tanks. Prepare to go to war.
Well, it's almost as funny as real life, isn't it? Javier, thank you very much for your time on the Nexus, and Jan Halper-Hayes also, and Brenda Estefan, thank you for your analysis as well. Appreciate it from all three of you. Thank you very much. Well, that is all from the Nexus for now. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.